Anybody hungry? How about pizza?
I'm down with that, my...
Out of all the movies Keanu Reeves has ever done, Hardball is the one critics slam the hardest, but to me, this is his peak. The movie hit theaters just a few days after 9/11 still opened at #1 at the US box office, and even now, it still lives in the audience's memory. 25 years have gone by. Keanu is still the star of all stars, one of the rare few who made it through Hollywood without letting it swallow him whole, and we still love him for that. But what about the others? There are still some unhappy lives that had to fight through childhood tragedy, domestic abuse, and even racism. Stay with me all the way through this journey to see where they are in 2026. And to make things more fun, I scattered a few little treasures in here for the real Hardball fans. Do not miss a second, because the deeper you go, the more you will realize you were absolutely right to love these faces. Number 1, Keanu Reeves as Conor O'Neill. Let's start with the very first name, the star of all stars, and also the one we love the most, Keanu Reeves. In Hardball, he played Conor O'Neill, a debt-ridden gambler whose life is falling apart, and then those kids end up waking up the rare, decent parts still left in him. Honestly, out of all the roles Keanu has ever done, this is still one of the ones I treasure most. Not because it is the flashiest, but because it reminds a man that no matter how far off the road he has gone, there is still a way back. Keanu was born in 1964. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was 37 years old. This year, he is 62. What matters here is that he took this role when he was already a major Hollywood star after milestones like Speed and especially The Matrix. So Conor O'Neill was not some chance for Keanu to prove who he was. This was the choice of a star who was already standing way up high, but still willing to step into a role with a lot of darkness, a lot of failure, and a whole lot less shine than what audiences were used to seeing from him. And Keanu's personal life, to be fair, would have been enough to break a whole lot of men. In 1999, his daughter with Jennifer Syme Ava was born, but did not survive. Then in 2001, Syme died in a car accident. Later on, Keanu said grief and loss never really go away. When you hear a line like that, you know right away that is not complaining. That is the voice of a man who has carried that pain through the rest of his life and still kept quietly moving forward. These days, at 62, Keanu is still one of a kind. He is still making movies, still working, still getting the kind of love from audiences and people in the business that Hollywood almost never holds on to for that long. And that is exactly why Keanu Reeves has never been just a movie star. He is the kind of person you admire more the more you learn about him. Show him some love down in the comments and stick around a few more minutes to hear one more truth about Keanu that will make you feel even prouder. You picked the right man to admire, but for now, let's move on to Diane Lane. Number 2, Diane Lane as Elizabeth Wilkes. Diane Lane played Elizabeth Wilkes, the teacher who sees the good still left inside Conor O'Neill and also the one who keeps Hardball from drifting all the way into chaos. For American men from a certain generation, Diane Lane was the dream woman. But what makes me respect her in this movie is not just that kind of charm. What matters more is that behind that calm presence was a life that was anything but easy. Diane Lane was born in 1965. When Hardball came out in 2001, she was 36. This year, she is 61. And when she took this role, she was not some face out there looking for a break. She had already been working since she was a little girl on a professional stage from around age 6, made her film debut at 14, and even landed on the cover of Time while she was still a teenager. So in simple terms, Hardball was not where Diane Lane had to prove who she was. She walked into this movie as a woman who already had a whole lifetime in the business behind her. After Hardball, the movie did not exactly get embraced by critics. But just 1 year later, Diane Lane had a huge jump with Unfaithful, the role that got her an Oscar nomination for Best Actress. That detail matters a lot because it places Hardball right at a very specific turning point in her career, just before all of Hollywood had to look at her again as a serious heavyweight actress. And Diane Lane's personal life is where the real weight is. She grew up in a broken home early on, mostly living with her father in New York. Then by 15, she declared herself independent and went off to Los Angeles for a while. In 2024, she herself said that child actor life gave her a seat in therapy, and she also mentioned uncomfortable experiences with powerful men in the industry. Then, in 2004, Josh Brolin was arrested after Diane Lane called police and said he had hit her. Lane did not pursue charges, and his representatives called it a misunderstanding, but that marriage still ended in divorce in 2013. And luckily, Diane Lane did not let those blows wipe her out. She kept going, kept working, kept showing up in Feud Capote versus The Swans, A Man in Full, and by early 2026 had even joined Mike Flanagan's The Exorcist project. At 61, she is still the kind of face major directors want in their movies. And that is what makes people look at Diane Lane today with a whole lot more respect than they did back then. Number 3, Michael B. Jordan as Jamal. Michael B. Jordan played Jamal, not the most standout kid on the Kekambas team and not the biggest role in Hardball either. But looking back 25 years later, he is actually the face that went the farthest out of the entire cast. Michael B. Jordan was born in 1987. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was 14. This year, he is 39. The most important thing here is that Hardball is not just some dusty old credit on his resume. Jordan later said himself that this was his first major movie. In other words, this was one of the first real film milestones in his life that truly meant something back when the name Michael B. Jordan still did not carry any real weight with the public. After that movie, Jordan did not blow up right away. He took the long road, one step at a time. From The Wire to Friday Night Lights, then Fruitvale Station, Creed, Black Panther, and by 2026, the Oscar for Best Actor for Sinners. That is what really makes people respect him. Not one lucky break, but more than 2 decades of steady, disciplined work that took him from a supporting kid in Hardball to a man standing on the Oscar stage. As for Jordan's personal life, it is not the kind of scandal that wrecks a career. The more notable part is the pressure. In 2024, he admitted he had been struggling with loneliness, with carrying too much responsibility, and with the feeling that not everybody really understands his life. Then, late in 2023, he was also involved in a Ferrari crash in Hollywood. But LAPD confirmed there were no injuries, no arrest, and no evidence of reckless driving. These days at 39, Michael B. Jordan is exactly where very few child actors ever make it. From Jamal in Hardball to Oscar winner, that is a road long enough to make people realize that sometimes in an old movie, the person who ends up going the farthest is the face hardly anybody noticed at first. But now, let's pause for a second and talk about a few fun facts about this first group. All right, let's stop here for just a second, because this opening stretch of Hardball already shows that this was not some small movie with some ordinary cast. And if you think you already know enough about the big names, not yet. These 3 little pieces are what make the story more fun, stranger, and very much like early 2000 Hollywood. First, Keanu Reeves. He went on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno on September 10th, 2001 to promote Hardball. 4 days later, the movie hit theaters. And what still feels strange even now is that even though it came out just days after 9/11, Hardball still opened at number 1 at the US box office, pulling in $9,386,342 in its first weekend. That timing alone gives this movie a very different layer of memory. But that is not even the best Keanu story. Michael B. Jordan once said that during filming, Keanu took the whole cast out to dinner, and right there at that dinner, young Jordan even got to meet Lawrence Fishburne. That is exactly the kind of story where you instantly understand why people love Keanu so much. And Diane Lane pulled off something genuinely rare that same weekend. On the very same day, September 14th, 2001, she had 2 movies open in theaters, Hardball and The Glass House. And the result was Hardball at number 1 and The Glass House at number 2. Not everybody in Hollywood gets a weekend like that. All right, now we leave the big stars behind and move into the part a lot of people remember most about Hardball, those child faces from back then. And the next one is Bryan Hearne. Number 4, Bryan Hearne as Andre Ray Peetes. Bryan Hearne played Andre Ray Peetes, the team captain of the Kekambas, and this was not some face that just drifted by in Hardball. He played Andre Ray Peetes, and the fact that he was the captain alone already tells you this kid was never standing off to the side of the story. Bryan Hearne was born in 1988. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was 13. This year, he is 38. What matters is that Hardball was not some one-off milestone that just sank away. Only 1 year later, Hearne joined Nickelodeon's All That from Season 7 through Season 8. For a young black child actor in the early 2000s, that was the kind of next step that made people believe he had a very bright road ahead of him. But the heaviest and darkest part of Bryan Hearne's story is in what he publicly talked about years later. Before Quiet on Set came out, Hearne told people that when he was working at Nickelodeon, he had been called a piece of charcoal pushed into racial stereotypes and even had peanut butter spread on him so dogs could lick it off during a challenge when he was only 13. He also said there was almost nobody really protecting his mental health on set. These are Hearne's own public words, and that alone is enough to show the price a child star can end up paying. What is admirable is that Bryan Hearne did not let that part of his life bury him. The Los Angeles Times reported that he is now co-CEO of Urban Poet Society, and Columbia Basin College noted that he and his wife were honored with the MLK Spirit Award in 2021 for community work and healing. That is a far more grown-up ending than most people would have imagined when they looked at that little team captain in Hardball. Number 5, Michael Perkins as Kofi Evans. Michael Perkins played Kofi Evans, and to me, this is one of the boys who made Hardball stay in the audience's heart for so long. Michael Perkins was born in 1988. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was 13. This year, he is 38. And what matters here is that Hardball was pretty much his real starting point on screen. He came from Chicago, later studied at Alabama A&M University, and earned a degree in business management. That road alone already tells you Michael Perkins did not stay on the Hollywood child star path for very long. For a lot of people, Michael Perkins is still Kofi Evans. That role has pretty much stayed the biggest mark attached to his name even now. On social media, he still mentions that role himself, almost like he knows perfectly well that it is a memory the audience never truly let go of. Some actors spend a whole lifetime and never leave behind even one role that lasts. Michael Perkins almost only had one big role, but that one role was enough to make people remember him for decades. And honestly, Michael Perkins does not have some major scandal-filled record or a loud chain of public disasters. His story is not about scandal. It is about having one role that hit with overwhelming emotional force, then stepping out of Hollywood's spotlight and into a more ordinary life. BuzzFeed once put Kofi's scene on a list of movie-crying moments that shattered audiences the most. And maybe that is the right way to remember Michael Perkins today. Not as some star who grew up surrounded by fame, but as a boy who touched the pain of this movie in a very real way, then quietly kept going. And now let's move on to DeWayne Warren. Number 6, DeWayne Warren as Jarius G. Baby Evans. DeWayne Warren played Jarius G. Baby Evans, and this is one of those characters where all you have to do is say the name, and Hardball comes rushing right back. DeWayne Warren was born in 1992. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was only 9 years old. This year he is 34, and that is probably why G-Baby got burned into people's memories so deeply. What matters is that after that, Warren did not go down the usual Hollywood child star path the way a lot of people thought he would. His public credits show that besides Hardball, he only picked up a few more projects like La Femme Vampire in 2009 and Unanimous in 2020. Not some long major screen career. Number 7, Julian Griffith as Jefferson Albert Tibbs. Julian Griffith played Jefferson Albert Tibbs, and he is one of those faces from the Kekambas team that audiences remember the second they see him. Julian said his mother heard about the casting call on the radio, took him to the audition at Evergreen Plaza Mall in Chicago, and then he had to go through about 5 or 6 rounds of auditions before he landed. Jefferson Albert Tibbs. Julian was born in 1990. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was 11. This year, he is 36. IMDb says that as early as 2000, when he was just 10, he booked his first major role as Jefferson Albert Tibbs. That was a beautiful start, but Julian's story did not go down the familiar child star road a lot of people might assume. After Hardball, Julian did not blow up into another Michael B. Jordan, but he did not disappear either. His public work record shows he kept coming back to the screen with projects like Chicago P, D Chicago Fire, Chicago Med, Utopia, Proven Innocent, and South Side. That says something pretty clearly. He did not have some flashy career path, but he managed to keep a foothold in the business longer than a lot of people would have expected. The most interesting part of Julian's story actually happened off screen. After Hardball, he decided to chase baseball in real life, played in college, then signed professional contracts. Baseball Reference has his playing record, and the All Sports Best podcast confirmed that after his early success with Hardball, Julian chose to seriously pursue baseball. These days on Instagram, he describes himself as a SAG actor, ex-pro baseball player, speaker, and dad. All right, before we leave this group of kids, let's stop for a second. Because to be fair, Hardball did not just cast the right faces. This movie also left behind a few stories that make you realize your memory of those kids was never quite complete. And this is where three small but really valuable details come in. First, Bryan Hearne. If you still remember that old team captain as one of the sharp, lively faces of the Kekambas years later, Bryan became one of the people who made the public see the child star world in a very different way. Before Quiet on Set, he told people that back when he was at Nickelodeon, he had been called a piece of charcoal. Just one detail like that is enough to make people realize that behind a childhood face, there could be a whole story that was anything but light. Michael Perkins is different. The internet remembers Kofi in exactly the most painful place. BuzzFeed once put Kofi Evans's crying scene on a list of movie and TV crying moments that absolutely shattered audiences, bringing people right back to the moment when he tried to comfort G-Baby. In other words, if you felt Hardball hurt the most in that one spot, audiences years later still remember the exact same place. And now, G-Baby. DeWayne Warren once said that he beat out more than 100 other kids to get the role. And once you hear that, you realize some small roles can ruin the whole emotional core of a movie if they cast the wrong person. G-Baby was exactly that kind of role. All right, now we leave the kids of Hardball behind and move into a different layer, older, heavier, more grounded, but still very memorable. And the first name in that group is John Hawkes. Number 8, John Hawkes as Ticky Tobin. You remember Ticky Tobin, right? He is a guy who sits right in the darkest part of the adult world in hardball debt and gambling. The role was played by John Hawkes. John Hawkes was born in 1959. When Hardball came out in 2001, he was 42. This year, he is 67. His real name is John Perkins, but he changed it to John Hawkes because there was already another John Perkins in the Union. That sounds like a tiny detail, but it actually fits his whole career perfectly. A man who started working very early, quietly, took the long road, and it took years before audiences really learned his name. After Hardball, John Hawkes did not blow up like a box office star. He went down a harder road and a steadier one. From Deadwood to Winter's Bone, then The Sessions, he slowly became the kind of actor directors trust deeply, and older audiences tend to respect more and more. More recently, he made another strong impression in True Detective Night Country in 2024, once again, proving that he is the kind of actor who does not need noise to weigh down an entire scene with pure craft alone. As for real life, Hawks' story is not about scandal. It is about the grind of an extremely long professional road. The Guardian once wrote that he grew up in Minnesota on a farm his father lost during the recession in the 1980s. And from being a man who rose very slowly and very quietly, it took him nearly 3 decades to finally reach the Oscar circle. Number 9, Mike McGlone as Jimmy Fleming. Mike McGlone played Jimmy Fleming, Conor O'Neill's old friend. In Hardball, Jimmy is not a loud character, but he is the link that really gets the whole story moving. Jimmy is the one who makes the deal that forces Conor to coach the team, and from there the whole movie opens up. When Hardball came out in 2001, McGlone was 29. This year he is 54. Before that point, he was not a new face anymore. He already had the brothers McMullen in 1995. She's the one in 1996, The Bone Collector in 1999, then Happy Accidents and Dinner Rush in 2000. In short, Mike McGlone came into Hardball as a man who already knew the craft, not somebody waiting around for his first role to get noticed. After Hardball, McGlone did not go down the A-list star path. He moved into a different kind of career, steadier and honestly more interesting. In 2007, there was The Kill Point. In 2009, there was Crash. From 2011 to 2016, he had a recurring role on Person of Interest. In between and after that, he also showed up on Psych Elementary SWAT, The Rookie Feds, and NCIS Hawaii. But if you only look at him as a supporting actor, that is still not the whole picture. Mike McGlone also writes novels, does voiceover work, and releases music. He had the album Hero in 1999, To Be Down in 2002, Speed in 2016, then the EP The Center in 2017. By 2025, he even returned as Patrick McMullen in The Family McMullen, the follow-up to the movie that first helped get his name noticed. And now we get to the final name, a supporting face who still left a very long aftertaste. Number 10, Mark Margolis as Fink. If there is one name that makes the most sense to close this list, it is Mark Margolis. Not because the role of Fink in Hardball was all that big, but because he is the kind of actor who feels heavier the more you look back. In Hardball in 2001, while Keanu Reeves was pulling audiences into theaters, Mark Margolis was already a veteran actor. Mark Margolis was born on November 26, 1939, in Philadelphia. Long before Hardball, he already had a whole life in the profession behind him with milestones like Scarface in 1983, then a long run of TV and film roles stretching over decades. But the thing that really made his name explode came much later. That was Hector Salamanca in Breaking Bad from 2009 to 2011, then Better Call Saul from 2016 to 2022. That role alone got him an Emmy nomination in 2012. And that is exactly why Mark Margolis is such a fitting way to close this video. He was not a man who won through youth good looks or star shine. He won through time, through skill, and through still being unforgettable very late in his career. Mark Margolis passed away on August 3, 2023 at the age of 83. And before we close out this last group, there are still 3 small things worth hearing about the supporting faces you just went through. Before we close the cast section, there are 3 last things worth hearing about the men who gave this movie more wear and tear more weight, and even a little more surprise. First, John Hawkes. He once said very plainly that if you want to be a good actor, you have to keep the ability to be invisible. That sounds exactly like Hawkes. He does not need to stand out loudly in real life, does not need to run around doing talk shows nonstop. He just has to step into a scene and the audience believes right away that this man belongs in that world. And if you think a quiet actor like that must have an easy life in the business, not at all. While making the sessions, Hawkes had to keep his body locked into a tight bent position for long stretches for the role, and he himself said very clearly that it was an extremely physical experience. In other words, he does not just act with technique. He really pays for the role with his body, too. Mike McGlone, on the other hand, gives you a really fun little realization. You may not remember his name right away, but there is a very good chance you have seen or heard him for years in those noir-style geeko ads asking those familiar-sounding detective questions. That just goes to show Hardball really is one of those movies where the deeper you dig into the cast, the more interesting it gets. Maybe I am being a little biased because Hardball has Keanu Reeves in it, and Conor O'Neill's story feels a lot more like mine than I ever wanted to admit. There was a time when I went through some days that were not exactly glorious, Had moments when I felt myself slipping farther than I meant to, and that is exactly why this movie has always hit me much harder than a lot of other sports films from that same era. It is not just about baseball, it is about a man who falls down, then slowly finds his way back to his feet. Then time just keeps moving. I got through the hardest part of my life and Hardball drifted farther back like an old tape sitting somewhere in memory. But the strange thing is, every time I revisit it, the feeling is still there. So knowing that a lot of the faces I used to care about are still out there, somewhere, still alive, still working, still moving forward, that is a very real kind of joy. And it also comes with a little sadness when I think about the names who are already gone. Now it is your turn. What do you remember Hardball most for, and which face from this cast hits you the hardest